Hello everyone, welcome to Suited for Gaming for another statue impressions video. The subject of today's topic being Sideshow's Gamora premium format statue. And Gamora is not a very recognizable Marvel character, and what little fame she has she owes to the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, because I'm fairly certain that not all, but most of you know her character from that specific motion picture. However, this statue is modeled after the comic book version inspired by J. Scott Campbell's interpretation of the character, which, to be fair, is a far cry from the more risque version that most of our longtime fans are probably familiar with. But what can you really do? As comic book fans, we're going to have to settle for conservative representations of our favorite Marvel characters that fall under that all-powerful Disney umbrella. But that's another topic for another person on another video, so let's get back to the statue in question. And I just want to start off by saying that Sideshow did a great job bringing Scott Campbell's art into 3D sculpt, at least on the piece that I received. This is the type of sculpt work that would make any Mass Effect statue envious. However, as an armor-based statue, aside from the base, there really isn't a lot of intricate color blends or gradients that you can find on it. But the quality of application and the vibrancy of the colors help to make the dimensions of this statue look more nuanced and complicated. The deep red highlights, the touches of gray, and the white armor, they all work in unison to pave an avenue of interwoven layers, and this application creates a sense of density to an otherwise simple looking armor. This statue relies heavily on clean paintwork than anything else, because you'll be hard pressed to find a lot of texturing on this statue. But what little I found on her chest, the back of her knees, and on the base, I was very pleased with. And speaking of the base, there's a lot of detail to it. It's supposed to represent the surface of a planet, and it does an amazing job at it. When this statue was initially announced by Sideshow, I saw the crystals on the base and I thought it looked extremely tacky, but once I had it in hand, those crystals look beyond amazing, and they breathe life to the statue depending on the lighting you set up around it. The surface of the base itself goes beyond what I initially expected, which was simply rocky texturing, but the paint application takes it to another level as it convincingly depicts a subsurface of what seems like copper-like deposits that have slowly worked their way to the top, mimicking a weathering effect. And to top it all off, there are light blue faults painted on the surface that tell a story of how those crystals are formed. And with all the impressive detailing on the base, what I found most impressive was the line work on the statue itself. On a statue of this nature, where armor is prevalent, to me, the lines are the most important thing. It can make or break a piece depending on whether the paint type is too far away from the lines, or if the paint has spilled over into them, creating a sense of disjointedness in all the wrong places. Fortunately, none of this was the case on my statue. And what I found even more surprising is that the lines are engraved on the pieces. It would have been easy to sculpt hundreds of different sections for the armor, paint them separately, and then glue them together, but it doesn't seem to be the case here. I couldn't find any notable seams on the armor itself, and most of the lines I tracked did not transition over to the other side. I personally found that very refreshing. Now, all that being said, it's time to highlight the shortcomings of the statue. Some of you might relate, most of you might not, but these points, once again, are my personal feelings about this statue, so take it for what you will. Just try not to be offended by my opinions if you can help it. So problem number one, the armor looks amazing on paper. It's nice and clean, but I don't feel it really works for a statue design. The reason I feel this way is because of the joints. If you look at the padding on her knees or elbows and her wrists, most people will logically say those are protective pieces to help prevent injury. But for a sculpt, I can't shake the feeling that they're articulation points. In essence, those sections make this piece feel less like a premium statue and more like a high-quality action figure. The second problem I had is that there's use of very cheap plastic on this statue. The sword and the exclusive dagger are made of plastic. The sword is probably the cheapest thing on the statue, and it feels like it'll break with the slightest touch, so you'll have to be very careful with it. The dagger has a bit more thickness to it, so it's more durable, but it's still plastic. The belt around her waist is also some sort of harder plastic. It might be PVC, I'm not so sure, but it has some slack to it, and it also feels super cheap. I understand they couldn't sculpt it because it would have to go around her waist, but I would have preferred if they actually went with a leather belt instead. As it is, it feels out of place for me, and at the asking price, they could have at the very least made that EX dagger out of metal. Problem number 3 is the pose and the portrait do not match. They're both done pretty well. I have no complaints about them individually. I especially love her portrait, but the face and the body seem mismatched. It looks a bit awkward. Gamora's face is expressionless, it's more suited for a traditional museum pose, but the stance is a bit more dynamic. They didn't have to change much, to be honest. Perhaps a slight smirk or having one eyebrow raised higher than the other would have gone a long way in getting rid of that awkwardness for me. And lastly, problem number 4. I'm really struggling to make her stand out by herself. As a standalone piece, she looks decent, but she really shines when she's with other statues. And that might be intentional since she's the first member of the Guardians of the Galaxy cast that Sideshow is releasing. She just seems more like a side piece than a main piece right now. And that might be defaulting back to problem number 3, which is the discrepancy between the pose and the portrait. So those are the primary issues I have with the statue. To be honest, I would have sent her back to Sideshow right away, but for now I've decided to keep her until the rest of the Guardians of the Galaxy cast arrives to see how well she plays with them. While I don't like how she looks by herself, I think she might be a piece that could drastically improve with the intended companion pieces. And that's it. That's my personal impressions about this statue, and I'm curious if you own her. What did you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you feel about this statue in general? Is she worth the asking price now that you have her in your hands? Let me know. And aside from that, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you like it. If you didn't, then dislike it. But let me know in the comments what you'd like to see done differently so I can work on it. Thanks for watching, everyone, and all the best.